All new Pacific Mornings with Will on 531 PI.
It is 7:34. You're listening to Pacific Mornings on 531 PI. Now, of course, it's been making global headlines across, like I say, across the globe ever since yesterday. Obviously, we're talking about the Trump assassination attempt. Now, US President Joe Biden has called for a thorough and swift investigation into the assassination attempt against Donald Trump and said he was grateful the former president was recovering. Now, Trump had just begun a campaign speech in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday when shots rang out, hitting the former president's right ear and streaking his face with blood. The Secret Service agents fatally shot the suspect, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, who they say fired from the roof of a building near the stage where Trump was speaking. Here for his reaction to all of this is international relations expert Jeffrey Miller. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, William.
What do you make of this? Extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary, and it's just one of these events that you will remember forever, really. You will remember when you heard the news probably about this assassination attempt on Donald Trump. He was incredibly lucky, just, missed him by inches or probably less than that, really, if that bullet had just been a little bit further over. And we would be looking at an actual assassination and not just an attempt. But of course, that is bad enough, and you have had at least one victim killed, several others wounded, several innocent bystanders, simply rally goers who were there to watch Donald Trump speak in Pennsylvania. So it is one of these moments, and it will change the US presidential campaign. That much we can say for certain. The only question really is how.
Certainly. And just moments ago, the FBI said no ideology had been identified with the suspect at this stage. What do you think that says about the state of the US at the moment?
Look, we're going to have to wait and see exactly what the motivations of the gunman, Thomas Matthew Crooks, was, and that's going to take some time. In a sense, though, we are in this sort of post-truth era, and the facts, in some ways, won't really matter because both sides will read into it what they want to, and no doubt there are already the conspiracy theories emerging on all of this and what exactly transpired yesterday. I don't know. I mean, there are so many uncertainties here. I think you could see all manner of things happen here. Donald Trump certainly could and is likely to go up in the polls. If you compare this with Ronald Reagan's assassination attempt, the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, I should say, back in 1981, 43 years ago, he went up in the polls by 15 to 20 points at that point. And he wasn't in a campaign mode. He was in his first year of office, but his approval rating went up sharply. If the same thing happens this time, that should easily see Donald Trump win the White House. But I don't need to really remind you that we're not really in the same era that Ronald Reagan was in. We're in an incredibly polarized time in US politics and global politics. And I don't think we should rule anything out. I think for Joe Biden, there's some opportunities here, tasteless as perhaps that word sounds after this assassination attempt, but it gives Joe Biden a chance to look very much the statesman. He's spoken just in the last hour on this, calling to saying there's no place for political violence in America. He's going to speak in a few hours' time at midday New Zealand time from the Oval Office on all of this. And suddenly, perhaps Joe Biden misidentifying Volodymyr Zelensky as Vladimir Putin, that somehow that doesn't seem like that big a deal anymore.
That's right.
So there are chances for Joe Biden to have a reset to some extent of his election campaign, and it perhaps secures his nomination in a way that wasn't the case just a couple of days ago.
Certainly. And look, we've already mentioned it, but I wonder if we go into it a wee bit further here. I'm already looking at headlines that suggest that perhaps this would be a landslide now for Trump. Do you think that could be the case?
Look, it could be. It just depends very much on what the voters in the swing states think of all of this. Remember, the US election really comes down to a handful of states, no more than 10 or 12 states, because most states are locked in. They're solidly Republican or they're solidly Democrat. And then there's just a handful in the middle that are toss-ups in a sense. And this rally was held in Pennsylvania, was held in one of the swing states. I mean, there's no accident there. You tend to hold your rallies in the swing states. But that will have a huge impact on voters there and voters throughout the United States. And that iconic image, it's already iconic. It's not even 24 hours old. The image of Donald Trump with blood on his face fist pumping in the air below the American flag. That's an iconic image. Will no doubt be the image of the year for many. And in a sense, Donald Trump just simply needs to have that image everywhere he goes, and it makes him look, projects strength for Donald Trump, and may also open him up to voters who really were not Donald Trump voters before this, but who may think, look, I don't like this guy, but I really respect him. Look how he got up after he had a bullet go past his ear, and he stood up and he did not let himself be cowed by a gunman. So, there's a whole range of probabilities here and possibilities, and we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out. We've got 4 months until the election on November the 5th, and I'm sure anything can and will happen before then.
Look, not to get, tasteless here, but from a political nerd perspective, my goodness, things have just completely shifted, at least for me, in terms of watching this US election. And I see, to Trump's credit, actually, this is according to Reuters this morning, he still intends on going to the GOP convention. In terms of, here's the $1 million question, Jeffrey. Where to next for both camps? What do they need to do to try and please their voters? Because it almost feels like we know that the US was divided before this. Could this just make things even more divided?
Yes, unfortunately, we're probably likely to see greater political polarization and not less, despite the calls for unity from both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I mean, that's the remarkable thing. If you look at their speeches and statements that they've given in the last 24 hours, there are a lot of similarities between them. And Joe Biden telephoned Donald Trump, notably Joe Biden, when he first spoke about this shooting, he referred to Donald Trump by his first name. I mean, we're seeing a lot of things that you couldn't have foreseen, as I say, just 24 hours ago. But unfortunately, just given the climate we're in, we're likely to see more political polarization, not less. And unfortunately, that's just been the trajectory of US politics and really global politics over the last 20 years, really. But it's accelerated, particularly during the COVID pandemic and afterwards. We are living in some very febrile times globally. When you look at what's happening in the Middle East, when you look at what's happening in Ukraine, these issues just aren't getting the airtime right at the moment, understandably, because of what's happening in the United States. But there are big developments going on all around us at the moment. Big developments in the Pacific, I should also add, with Vanuatu's Prime Minister visiting China just in the past few days, and they're seeking to upgrade their comprehensive strategic partnership. So there will be plenty for New Zealand to take in on all of this as well. And Winston Peters is heading up to South Korea and Japan this week. There'll be plenty for him to be talking about with everything that's gone on in the United States and now what's going around the world. Yeah.
Just quickly, and not to labour on this for too long, but I suppose, does the US have a problem when it comes to political violence? This is not, of course, this is far from the first time that there's been an assassination attempt on a sitting president, or well, former president rather.
Indeed. Look, you can go back right through to Abraham Lincoln, and there have been plenty of assassinations, failed and successful, since then. Political violence in general, from a global perspective, goes right back to 44 BC when Julius Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March. So it's not a new phenomenon. I don't think it's confined just to the United States either. Lest we get on our high horse about this. Of course, New Zealand has had its own experience with politically motivated violence. You just go back to March the 15th in 2019 to see that. But if you look at other countries, just 2 months ago, you had an assassination attempt on Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia.
That's right.
If you recall, in the United Kingdom, you had two political assassinations. Joe Cox back in 2016, just before Brexit happened, and David Amess in 2021, another British politician who was killed when he was giving a clinic at his electorate office. So there are many examples from many different countries, and where Winston Peters is going to this week to Japan, they have the tragic experience of Shinzo Abe being killed
Yes.
2 years ago. So all around the world, this is sadly a global phenomenon, political violence, and we need to speak up against it. There's no reason for it in the end. We should be competing with our ideas, not with bullets. And I think it's heartening in some ways to see both Joe Biden and Donald Trump condemning this and standing up and saying we need to be united. Unfortunately, I think these words will probably fall on deaf ears, but I think it's good to see them trying. And look, we may see some unprecedented things happening during this election campaign. Who knows? Perhaps Joe Biden and Donald Trump will get on a stage together somewhere and shake hands and say, you can like us or dislike us, but please don't resort to violence. That won't get us anywhere. Let's wait and see whether that happens again. I wouldn't hold my breath, but you never know. Sometimes the great unexpected can happen after a moment like this.
And just finally, I think we should go there. I mean, we're in a different world now. It almost feels like it's feeble and shouldn't even be worth mentioning because there's bigger fish to fry, given what happened on the weekend. But the gaffes from President Biden following the NATO summit, of course, calling, like you say, Volodymyr Zelensky Putin, and then calling his own Vice President Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. Gaffes like that. Any impact on Biden, do you think, or has it just been overshadowed by what's actually happened at the weekend?
Yeah, I think you summarize it well there. Look, if we'd been talking 24, 48 hours ago, that would have been the big topic to be talking about. And everyone was analyzing the impact of this, Joe Biden's gaffes, and then that came on top of his weak performance at the debate a couple of weeks ago, on top of, several weak interviews that he had given. None of that's going to really matter now, I think. There's going to be a great reset. Now, that doesn't mean that all Joe Biden's problems are solved, but I think it probably does guarantee him now the nomination. I think the likes of George Clooney will just keep quiet for a bit now, and that nomination in the end will just go through. Remember, he already is the nominee. He's gone through the primary process, and there is simply a formal process now under which Joe Biden is officially nominated at the Democratic National Convention. There was some talk that that would potentially happen a little bit earlier than planned. The Democratic National Convention is next month in August. There was some talk that that nomination officially might happen via Zoom beforehand. I'm not sure what the current state of plans are, but I think, look, Joe Biden looks like a statesman when he's up there and speaking about these issues, and I think he looks quite good. For many voters, they'll say, look, Joe Biden, look, he can misspeak and say the wrong name at the wrong time, but look, he's the grandfather we all need right now, and bringing this uniting message of working together, unity. Perhaps that's actually, what we need right now after this national tragedy here and this national moment of an assassination attempt. Perhaps Joe Biden is actually the man of the hour. So I think at the very least it will reset his campaign. It's not going to solve all his problems because Donald Trump in all likelihood will go up in the polls, but it might secure his nomination as the Democratic nominee.
Certainly. Well, thank you very much for your expertise as always, international relations expert Jeffrey Miller. You have a good day.
You too. Thanks.